Los Angeles and HP boycott. My only problem with this panel is the tens of thousands of people that are not here right now to hear it. And I hope we can get this DVD into the hands of a lot of people we work with. Another thing that would be very helpful, though, is those of you who have this amazing information, if we could compile it on a website page that is not like just a text of the stories you've told and paragraphs, like more like bullet points. So if we're going to, we have a group in our area that's working on, you know, ethnic studies, that we could have some bulletproof points about the struggle for Chicanos in Tucson and the struggle against Palestinian, the wiping out of Middle East history. Or if we're working with organizations that deal with police repression in Los Angeles, we can have some specific bulleted items that say X number of people, blacks, were killed there and X number of Palestinians were killed in the same month, or something that's very specific and usable so that we can pull that out and put in the leaflets. Without having to, each of us, comb through all the information that's out there and to find these bullet points. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Ruder. I'm from Chicago, and it was such an exciting experience this summer to march. Actually, I was in Ferguson as well, but also in the streets of Chicago when Israel was bombing Gaza, and seeing members of SJP chapters marching and chanting, "From Palestine to Mexico, border walls have got to go." And it gave me goosebumps because it's this moment where, and I think Ali Abou-Nima's book, The Battle for Justice in Palestine, kind of makes this case as well, that this is a time when Palestine activists can and should make those common causes. And it seems, I think, maybe to us sitting here, just sort of elementary, you know, the United States is militarizing the border, is sending all this military equipment to the police force in Ferguson, and is, you know, the main supporter of Israel's occupation. And I think that, to me, the question, and this is what I'm curious about, what the panelists think, it seems by definition we can't all have the same experiences of oppression or anything else. We're all individual. We all can only really have a limited part of the human experience as an individual. But on the other hand, it's possible to show that there is this common opponent that the United States represents, you know, and that what we need is shared political principles if we can't have shared experiences. And so how do you move people to opposition to U.S. imperialism, support for anti-racism, support for self-determination, support for liberation? And maybe people could speak with that, because that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how to move people from those different experiences to shared principles that we can all unite around. Thank you.
We'll take one more question and then we'll go.
Hi, my name is Rabab Abdelhadi, San Francisco State University. First of all, I want to thank you for an amazing panel, especially it's very gratifying to find young people with amazing analysis.
I'm not that young, but thank you.
You're not young? Okay, all right. Sorry. You're very much younger than me. But, so I actually wanted to kind of raise a few points, specifically in view of what's going on in Ferguson and the possibility of building coalition and alliances to protest and so on. And it's not just a question for you, Suhail, but I would like people on the panel to think about that. I think one of the things that I'd like you to speak to is what sort of campaigns and education and organizing can happen actually within Palestinian Arab Muslim communities, specifically around educating and our others too. So it's not just the communities, maybe this is not very appropriate here, but definitely the question of allies, because we are talking about the solidarity movement here. How do we talk about these kind of issues and sensitize and basically really raise consciousness around the question of racism and the importance of having a clear, very anti-racist line and anti-racist understanding that is not only for immediate gains in order for us to get build support for Palestine and so on, which you all spoke about, but I'm asking you to kind of like maybe expand on it. The second thing is, how do we complicate the beginning of sometime when people start building solidarity? There is always a rush to kind of like bring things together. So I was actually maybe everybody can speak to that, but Krishna was specifically thinking about the freedom riders in Palestine on the summer and so on. I was a bit troubled by that campaign. And I was maybe thinking, maybe you can expand a little bit around the debate that happened after the ASA vote and the discussion around that and how you thought about it at the time and in retrospect now, where things are at and so on, because our thinking grows. And how do we think about all of these issues? Because I think we need to be as critical as we are also celebrating and building our alliances. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond to any of the questions that were presented?
I want to reply to the question about what kind of programs can we have in the Arab community to raise awareness about oppression, and that's one of the questions that we had in our informal meeting, and I feel like one of the points that was raised, there's also segregation and oppression. So while the oppression on African Americans in the US has a different shape than the kind of oppression that we have. I'm going to be talking later about Rasmia Odeh, an American, Palestinian American, who is being, she's not, they might take her passport, revoke her citizenship, put her in jail for 10 years, and deport her, a 70-year-old Palestinian American woman, because basically she's an activist. Like, we can go to the details of why they think they need to do that, but it's basically because she's an activist. So it feels like they use different methods to oppress different people so that people can't draw these connections between oppression and don't stand with each other. Because if there is another Latina Malcolm X, or if there's another Arab Malcolm X, there's going to be a big problem. There's going to be a serious problem that they need to change, and that goes back to that testimony that that young man made, that we know what's wrong, we just don't want to talk how to fix it because it becomes very complicated. So personally, what I think needs to happen is that there needs to be more workshops where people talk about their personal experience, because no one can fight your personal experience. People can debate facts. Like, I want to go back to something that she had mentioned at the beginning about Darren Wilson being trained in Israel. It's the Tim Fitch, who was the head of the police in St. Louis, is the one who was trained in Israel, not Darren Wilson. But like, we can debate facts and names and who did what, but when it's your personal story, no one can fight that. And there needs to be more of these little workshops, and especially for the students in this room, we need to get together and we need to talk to each other, because that's where the real education happens.
So there was something I want to mention. I'm not sure if this is going to address one specific question, but I think this can possibly shed some light on a couple of concerns that were brought up. We talked about, okay, well, something that I've noticed, and especially has become an issue, particularly this summer, has been the quantification of oppression. It's reducing these actual human experiences down to numbers. X number of people died from this specific thing. X number of people have been incarcerated. And yes, the numbers are important in that we should recognize just to what extent these levels of oppression hurt communities. But at the same time, I feel like by focusing on these numbers and reducing every single person who suffers down to these things to a statistic, we're forgetting that this is a very human experience. Any kind of oppression is human. It touches every single person very deeply. So if I can just, a reminder to myself, of course, before anyone else, because I slip into this as well when I really want to get down to it. we're people. People who are suffering this level of oppression have names, they have stories, they have families, they have everything. And we should really make sure that we're focusing on that element of liberation before we start talking about how we had X number of success based on this statistic and this number and that quantity or whatever it is. So if we can, if we can all keep that mentality in mind, I think it can prove very helpful in how we progress in liberation movements overall.
So I think it's fitting that the professor posed the most challenging question for me to think about. Thank you, Professor Abdelhadi. And I'm still working through the answer as I'm talking. So I guess what Professor Abdelhadi brought up was after the American Studies Association boycott vote in December, the student activists circulated an article posing questions about anti-Black racism in Palestine and Israel, and its relation to the work that we're doing here. And among the larger concerns was that even though the resolution was addressing the issues that Palestinians face, it made no mention of similar policies of racism and refugee issues and dispossession that African migrants or citizens of Israel face. And that was emblematic of larger issues within movements that tend to, as I was talking about, for the sake of expediency, try to either consciously or unconsciously include or exclude other movements and groups in order to get to the end goal more quickly. And so for me, what this piece did was really complicate the idea of identity, because I went to Palestine last summer and met Black Palestinians, and I was like, no one ever told me there were Black Palestinians. Like, how is this a thing? And like, they'd see me, they'd be like, whoa, like, it's just this weird, really cool moment. But it was really troubling that, like, having been in the movement for a year and some change before that, I didn't know that there were African people that are Palestinian that were displaced in 48, that live in camps, that are seeking everything that other Palestinians are seeking. And I guess for me that creates a larger challenge of complicating identity. Like, what is Palestinian? Is it Arab? Is it Muslim? Is it, I mean, it's not either of those things. It's a pretty broad category. And I think it comes down to who's experiencing the major traumas that the occupation and its other components are creating. Similar question about what is Israeli, because to some it might just be European Jews or Mizrahi and Ashkenazi Jews, or what about the Ethiopian citizens of the town, or of the country? So it goes on and on and on. I think the larger point, and maybe this would be a good entry point for Palestinian, Arab, or Muslim communities, is to talk about the presence and existence of Afro-Palestinians, maybe what their experiences are in Palestine, and making the bridge from there from local to Palestine to what about racism, anti-racism in the United States. Yes, those are my thoughts on that.
So we'll take three more. Three.
Hi, my name is Max. I'm an organizer with Northeastern SJP in Boston. And I just want to start by saying how gratifying it is to see the future leaders of our movement today on the main stage doing such a wonderful job. And it's really And I want to bring up a point that I think Kristen alluded to, but that I'd like to hear everyone's sort of thoughts on it. And I am speaking as a white privileged Jewish organizer in this movement. And I want to sort of ask about the roles of Jewish solidarity activists and the importance of orienting ourselves to groups like USPCN and how the sort of pitfalls that we might fall into if we don't make sure that we're supporting the Palestinian quest for self-determination as opposed to thinking of ourselves as being Jews as the leaders of the movement. And I think this certainly comes up as in my own SJP chapter, who to do the leading, basically, and what the importance of our orientation to that is in this sort of joint struggle framework.
Hi, my name is Marissa. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and although I've not lived there most of my life, that's my hometown. Did a lot of my activism on the West Coast, up in Seattle. Helped with Hurricane Katrina relief, and basically we're in that point where these issues are converging again, and so I'm working with pro-Palestinian rights groups in San Antonio, as well as the October 22nd Coalition to Stop Police Brutality. There is some cases. So basically when I go back, I'm reporting to 2 different groups, and my job is to help to connect them. And, you know, I'd love to have the Palestinian contingent go to the march that we have for October 10th and October 22nd to, you know, bring justice to Marquise Jones, who also was shot down. You know, Laredo doesn't get much attention. They're dealing with the guy that he was schizophrenic, and he was shot between 60 and 90 times by 6 different policemen. They did a fist bump. You know, it's on camera, and I happen to know the reporters that, you know, that interviewed the truck stop, the guy who owns it, plus the security guard. It was really a BB gun that the guy had, and nobody, you know, the cops didn't listen to that information. They just opened fire. So I just wanted to say that even though I would love to go to Ferguson, I know the work is needed in my hometown. So that's where I'm going to be, but I would love to get more, you know, ammunition and help to synthesize it when I go back. I wanted to ask about class. Class is a big thing in the United States, I think. And it's one of the things that, the reason why some people, you know, maybe people that are in the middle class, they don't really connect to those struggles necessarily because they're very comfortable. And what I noticed is a lot of people that can make connections, the broader and universal connections, are really struggling families, you know, working class. So I know we're dealing with a lot of gaps between the rich and the poor in the United States, and I mean, I'd just like to hear a little bit about that. Thank you.
Hi, David Mandel from Sacramento, involved in Jewish Voice for Peace and National Lawyers Guild, and long history of working on this. Thanks very much for the panel and some of the challenging issues regarding solidarity and coalitions among different groups struggling for parallel goals or similar goals. It's a very specific question regarding a potential scenario, a happier scenario, but it's hypothetical, but it's also quite plausible. For instance, if Veolia, that a lot of us have been dealing with, and you particularly in St. Louis, seems like it's been making noises for a couple of years, and it may even be close to saying, okay, we give up, we're going to get out of the West Bank, we're going to get out of Israel altogether. And if that happens, which it might, it's really important for us to be able to declare a victory and to use that to build for future struggles and to increase our strength. But at the same time, that wouldn't mean that Veolia is halting its anti-labor policies, its anti-environmental policies, its privatization of resources, et cetera, et cetera. So do you have any thoughts on how to finesse such a situation, which may happen, hopefully will happen a lot of times, where we need to declare victory regarding, quote unquote, our issue, but still the opponent that we've been facing still has problems regarding issues of others with whom we're in solidarity, and how we might manage to make that a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. Does anyone on the panel want to respond to any of the